Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on.
And as it is the 20th of August, we are going to be watching The Three Faces of Eve from 1957, directed by Nunnally Johnson and starring Joanne Woodward. So to begin with, I have seen this movie previous to this viewing. Mind you, I believe I'd only seen it once before, and it was on one of that TVO series, Saturday Night at the Movies. It was quite a few years ago. I was probably in my early teens at the latest when I saw this, and it's been quite a few decades since I actually have seen it. And like I'd already mentioned, not only does this movie star Joanne Woodward, but it also stars Lee J. Cobb, Nancy Culp, David Wayne, Edwin Jerome, and Alistair Cook. Suffering from headaches and inexplicable blackouts, timid housewife Eve White, played by Joanne Woodward, begins seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Luther, played by Lee J. Cobb. He's stunned when she transforms Performa's eyes into the vivacious Eve Black and diagnosed her as having multiple personalities. It's not long before a third, calling herself Jane, also appears. Through hypnosis and continued therapy, Luther struggles to help Eve recall the trauma that caused her identity to fracture. Now, right out of the gate, this movie is definitely dated. The terms, which nowadays are much more common, the actual psychosis that this woman goes through has a different name. And also, the abuse that this woman suffers, like spousal abuse that is presented, and there's no condemnation for the man in this situation, the husband. And while this is based on an actual case, it does seem to be very Hollywoodized. It seems to comes forward in a very simplistic way. However, with the limited run of the movie, you obviously have to speed up the process and whatnot. But again, it's an interesting film, that is for sure. Part of the movie is the fact that Joanne Woodward does portray these three separate personalities completely different from the other, which is a very strong thing for her to be doing. The movie gives the audience the actual musical cue as the changing of the personalities, which is kind of cool. Obviously, within the movie, you don't hear because it's not diatratic music, it's actually just for the benefit of the audience. But Joanne Woodward does a fantastic job of transforming her posture, her way of speaking, her vocabulary even changes slightly depending on which version of the personality happens to be pushed forward. And having the familiar face of Lee J. Cobb playing the Dr. Luther, whereas I believe my first impression of this gentleman was The 12 Angry Men with Henry Fonda. But again, he's one of those actors that pops up every once in a while. And it took me a moment to try and remember why the husband, Ralph White, played by David Wayne, sounded familiar. I couldn't picture his face. It didn't look familiar to me, but his voice did. And then a quick IMDb, and hey, he's in the Andromeda Strain, which is a movie I saw earlier in this year. And also having a notable name of Alistair Cook being a faceless narrator that has no relevance to the story except for just to tell the audience what's going on is kind of an interesting thing to do. So it's on the 20th of August in 1951 when Eve is taken to psychiatrist Dr. Luther by her husband because she is having headaches and spell where she can't remember things that are happening. And that actually happens 3 minutes into this 1 hour and 31 minute movie. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this particular episode and look off into the future to see what we're going to be watching for tomorrow, which is the 21st of August. And that is going to be Ride with the Devil from 1999. So until next time, go see a movie.